Good day. This is Dick Mitchell of St. Mark's Episcopal Church in Highland, Maryland, continuing my set of talks on Holy Land pilgrimage. Thank you. Christians have an incarnational faith. Our God came and lived and died among us. We can point to a specific time and place. This is not some once upon a time in a land far, far away, or a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Our Christian story is not in a galaxy far away, but in a place where we can walk and reflect and understand in our own minds and see with our own eyes. There is a tradition here. Christians have traveled as pilgrims to the Holy Land, at least since the early 4th century and likely longer. And Jews themselves had a strong tradition of pilgrimage, as they were commanded to gather 3 times a year in Jerusalem to celebrate the great festivals of Passover, Pentecost, and Tabernacles. Perhaps the tradition of Christian pilgrimage is rooted in Jewish traditions. So in 2012, and again in the autumn of 2022, my wife Beth and I traveled to the Holy Land. Both of these trips were group tours, and both were with Episcopal groups. The earlier trip with the Episcopal Diocese of Maryland, and last year's trip with the Virginia Seminary in Alexandria. We understood these trips as pilgrimage. Now, part of it is pure sightseeing. We took many photos and bought souvenirs. But on the other hand, Beth and I have celebrated Eucharist in Jerusalem, on Mount Tabor, on the Mount of the Beatitudes, and in Emmaus. We have walked the Via Dolorosa. In 2012, on Palm Sunday, I was able to walk the route of Jesus' entry into from Bethany to the walls of Jerusalem, with several thousand fellow Christians as we sang and prayed in a great variety of tongues. Beth and I have renewed our baptismal covenant at the Jordan River and renewed our marriage vows at Cana. On both trips, we were traveling with fellow Episcopalians who largely shared our traditions and our prayers. Our leadership offered multiple opportunities for worship and for serious contemplation of the Christian experience. We have not sought out fancy shopping or deluxe meal experiences, but we've bought olive wood crosses and eaten at hotel buffets. And if the hotel is Jewish, we have learned fairly quickly how kosher rules work. If you have eggs with breakfast, you're likely not having meat, and don't expect a cheeseburger at a kosher McDonald's. And there are such. Here is a picture of one. It was closed when I took the picture, but it was open later. If circumstances ever permit you to travel to the Holy Land, you probably want to travel on a pilgrimage tour instead of some more generic one-size-fits-all tour. So last week we talked about Jerusalem, and the previous week talked about Galilee. Now I want to highlight some of the primary sites for Christian visitors elsewhere in the Holy Land, focusing on Israel and the West Bank, and to a lesser extent on Jordan. We did not travel south to Mount Sinai or visit Syria or Lebanon, all of which present far more issues than we're interested in. So let's begin with the largest metropolitan area in Israel. That is Tel Aviv, a city of the 21st century, which was founded on a sandy beach on the Mediterranean in 1909. It is a modern city on the Mediterranean. It's not nearly as interesting to me as Athens or Istanbul. Israel has about 9 million residents, and 4 million of them live in or around Tel Aviv, and 90% of those residents are Jewish. So we visited the city 3 times in our 2022 trip, and we found the city to have only limited interest to us. It is a large, handsome city with some of the tallest buildings in the Middle East, and it's served by an international airport and a modern commuter train network, and it is plagued with rush hour traffic congestions. Now, Tel Aviv was built next to the ancient city of Jaffa. It is also called Joppa, Joppa, Joppa in Scripture. In the book of Acts, Peter resided in Joppa when he was called upon to evangelize the centurion Cornelius. But today, Jaffa has been swallowed up by Tel Aviv, but it retains some of its old world charm. We did lunch there twice on our 2022 trip. Tel Aviv is a major first world city, fairly European in its flavor. Likewise, much of Israel is first world. For instance, we visited the nearby university town of Rehovot. It's the location of the Weizmann Institute of Science, one of the world's great research universities, and as modern a campus as any in the world. This image is a picture of a particle accelerator. However, as you move around Israel or on the West Bank, you encounter many Arab communities. The nation of Israel is 20% Arab, and significant portions of the Holy Land are Arab. At Nazareth and other towns in the north, Bethlehem and East Jerusalem. And these are really third world communities, and in appearance and in flavor, are much more like towns in Jordan or other Middle East countries. Now, you will visit Bethlehem. Bethlehem is the traditional site of Jesus' birth and has been a place of pilgrimage for Christians for at least 1,700 years. It lies only about 12 miles south of Jerusalem, but it is not within the state of Israel, but within the Palestinian territories. So you must cross the security barrier, the wall, to reach the town. Bethlehem is another hill town with the Church of the Nativity at its highest point, but the town has spread out over adjoining valleys. Now, the Church of the Nativity is the oldest church in the Holy Land. It was built originally about 330 AD and rebuilt about 575 AD. It can properly claim to be the oldest surviving Christian church in the Holy Land. The church is a classic Roman basilica, basically a large box with a separate chapel or grotto with an altar over the precise spot designated for Jesus' birth. So you may kneel and reverence or kiss the actual spot. It is a busy and crowded church, administered jointly by the Greek Orthodox, the Roman Catholics, and the Armenian Orthodox. When there are clashes, the Palestinian authorities sort them out. Here's where we can talk about the issue of location. How do we know the exact spot where Jesus was born? X marks the spot, but seems to be too good to be true. I doubt any of us can find X marks the spot where we ourselves were born. On the other hand, I think it is quite reasonable that the primitive Christian church would remember the location of Christ's Jerusalem tomb and perhaps the location of the family home in Nazareth. Also, in Bethlehem, there is a shepherd's field to visit with its own lovely modern day church and a regular stopping point for pilgrims. For Beth and for me, a favorite place to visit in Bethlehem is the Holy Land Handicraft Cooperative, where handsome olive wood souvenirs are sold at reasonable prices. We visited there on both trips. Indeed, in 2022, Beth intervened with the tour director to make certain that we visited the co-op, and we bought handsome olive wood manger scenes for all the kids. They shipped to America. Now, this was our only serious shopping on our travels. Bethlehem is a large Arab city. Once upon a time, it had a Christian majority, but now it's a Muslim majority, with many Christian families having migrated west. Of course, it is a major Christian attraction, and much of the city depends upon Western tourism. But it is the one town I've never really felt quite comfortable in. In 2012, there were large posters of supposed Palestinian martyrs on major streets. This year, in the Virginia Seminary pilgrimage that followed ours in the early part of the year, the guide and the bus driver, friends from our own trip, were attacked by extremists on Manger Square. They're both okay, but it was a scary experience for those VTS pilgrims. Now, leaving Bethlehem and moving on, outside of Jerusalem is the reported site of the biblical town of Emmaus, the town in Luke's gospel where two travelers met the resurrected Jesus. Now, in fact, no one knows for certain the actual location of the town of Emmaus. In fact, we don't know much about the town at all, but there are Byzantine ruins here, and this site is attributed to be the New Testament village of Emmaus. Now, if you go to the Holy Land, you will want to see the Jordan River, where Jesus was baptized. So if you leave Jerusalem and drive eastward toward the Jordan River, you will soon come into a desert, a truly barren land. This was the wilderness of biblical stories. It is unattractive hill country. It's a badlands. The story of the Good Samaritan takes place here on the road to Jericho, certainly a place where a single traveler on foot might be set upon by thieves. This is Bedouin country, good for goats and sheep, but not good for crops. This rolling desert country was the subject of Isaiah's prophecy. A voice cries out, in the wilderness, that is, in the desert, prepare the way of the Lord. Make straight in the desert a highway for our God. Now, the distance from Jerusalem to the Jordan River is about 35 or 40 miles, but the elevation change is dramatic, which means as you travel eastward from Jerusalem toward the Jordan River, you are going steadily downhill. The Jordan River itself rises above the Sea of Galilee, near Caesarea Philippi, and then flows south into the Sea of Galilee, then flows out the south end of the lake, fairly much now due south to the Dead Sea. The distance from the Sea of Galilee to the Dead Sea is about 65 miles. But the Jordan River lies at the bottom of this great rift, this cleft in the Earth's surface that runs from the Middle East down into East Africa and includes the lowest places on the surface of the Earth. Now, on the way to the Jordan River, heading from Jerusalem, as you head into this rift in the earth, you can stop at the ancient town of Jericho. Jerusalem sits at an elevation of 2,500 feet, but Jericho is 850 feet below sea level, somewhere between Jerusalem and Jericho going downhill. You will see the marker that you're actually passing through sea level. Now, the city of Jericho claims to be both the oldest city in the world and the lowest city in the world in terms of its elevation. It's a desert town. It's an Arab town. This is, of course, the city where Jesus cured blind Bartimaeus, and also where he spotted the diminutive tax collector Zacchaeus up in a sycamore tree and told him to come down, that he was dining with him that evening. And the locals will point out the actual sycamore tree. Now, there are archaeological digs. There is a sophisticated water system. There's a cable car ride. Here's a picture of the cable cars. A cable car ride up the side of a mountain to a Greek monastery. The Greek monastery, which are basically the holes in the side of the mountain there, was the alleged location where the devil tempted our Lord. Now, beyond Jericho is the Allenby Bridge over the Jordan River. The bridge was named for the British general who pushed the Ottoman Turks out of the Holy Land in World War I. It is a major crossing between Israel and the Palestinian territories on the West Bank and the Kingdom of Jordan on the East Bank. Today, the Jordan River seems not much more than a muddy creek, although irrigation programs have likely reduced the water flow. The river, of course, is an international border. The west side of the river is literally the West Bank, the Palestinian territory, but there is a security corridor along the western bank of the river administered by Israel. On the east bank of the river is the Kingdom of Jordan. When you reach the valley of the Jordan River, now significantly below sea level, you find an entirely different climate. Jerusalem is high and dry, but the river valley is warm and humid. You can find truck farming, vegetable crops, and such growing in the valley, presumably with the aid of irrigation. Now, until 1994, this border and the river were a major military zone with weapons and landmines. But in 1994, Jordan and Israel signed a peace treaty, and that has permitted the demilitarization of the river valley and led to a good bit of archaeological development and, frankly, also tourist development. Now, Jesus was baptized by his cousin John in the Jordan River. John's Gospel says he was baptized at a place called Bethany beyond Jordan. Now, where could that be? Archaeological digs at a location near Jericho have located Byzantine ruins that suggest a major riverside place of pilgrimage. And today, most Christian denominations treat this location as Bethany beyond Jordan, the place of Jesus' baptism. We visited this site both in 2012, that year from the Jordanian side, and also in 2022 on the West Bank on the Israeli or Palestinian side. And at both places, we renewed our baptismal vows. On the West Bank, overseen, I suspect, by the Israeli government, the site is heavily developed, and there is a visitor center and a walk-in site for ceremonial river baptisms. And that's the picture here. We saw many folks in the water on both trips. On the other side, the Jordanian government has invested heavily to promote its own tourism. There is a lovely Greek church and reports that other churches may be built on the site. It is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The picture you see in front of you is the picture of the Jordanian Guard on the Jordanian side looking over to the much more heavily developed Israeli side. But that is the width of the river at that point. Now, the other major tourist site in this region is the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea is 1,400 feet below sea level, the lowest spot on the surface of the earth. The Dead Sea has accumulated so much mineral and salt content that it does not sustain life, and hence its name. But it is also very, very buoyant. You can easily float on it. The sea salts have an alleged healthful properties, and you can get a mud-packed bath to refresh your skin. In addition, the Dead Sea is losing water. It's receding at a rate as much as 6 feet a year. There's not any particular Christian or even Jewish significance to the Dead Sea. It's just a fascinating location, and it draws many visitors. We visited in 2012 from the Jordanian side and in 2022 from the Israeli side. We seem to prefer the Jordanian side, which was quieter and less crowded. I did go floating in the Red Sea. I was not attracted to the mud pack baths. The Israeli side is much more of an Ocean City boardwalk with eateries and attractions. Beth and I just found a local pub, had some wine, and we people watched. Also, with the drop in the water levels, it is something of a hike downstairs to reach the actual surface of the Dead Sea. Now, near the Dead Sea is Qumran, the desert community that we understand produced the so-called Dead Sea Scrolls. Qumran is not a real Christian pilgrimage destination, but it's still often included on some tours. The Holy Land is full of large structural ruins. I've already mentioned the ruins of Crusader castles. King Herod the Great built a major seaport north of Tel Aviv called Caesarea Maritima, which means Caesarea by the sea. It became a major government center for the Roman administration of Judea, and St. Paul was imprisoned there for 2 years. These ruins are magnificent, but Beth and I have not visited them. It is the first item on my must-see list if we have the opportunity to return. Similarly, King Herod built a great burial memorial for himself. It's called the Herodium. It's out from Bethlehem. Again, we've not visited it. Now, a top site for visiting Jewish pilgrims in the Holy Land is Masada. Masada was the Herodian fortress that held out to the end after the Jewish revolt. Rather than surrender to the Romans, the besieged Jews killed their families and then killed themselves. That was the death of some 1,000 persons. Now, suicide has never been a Christian virtue, but Christian tours sometimes include Masada. We've not been there. Now, on both tours, both in 2012 and in 2022, Beth and I crossed over the Jordan River and visited the Kingdom of Jordan. Crossing this particular international border is always memorable. You must switch buses and switch tour guides and actually walk through the border control. The major attraction in Jordan is Petra, the capital of the Nabatean nation, possibly the biblical land of Edom, but it is a long drive from Jerusalem. And this is a picture of your pilgrim mounted on a very friendly camel. Another remarkable biblical site within the Kingdom of Jordan is Mount Nebo. According to tradition, from this vantage point, Moses was permitted to view the Holy Land before his death. This is a Franciscan site. It's a lovely hilltop viewing with magnificent vistas and also archaeological displays from previous churches on the site. Now, one additional stop on a Christian pilgrimage in Jordan is Madaba. Madaba is an ancient Moabite city about 20 miles south of the capital city of Amman. A Greek Orthodox church in the center of town in 1896 was discovered to include a map. This map is made up of some 2 million pieces of mosaic tile on the floor of the church. The map covers the Holy Land from the Nile Delta to Lebanon in the north, with a detailed map of the city of Jerusalem, as they all existed when the map was created in the 6th century. The map has been damaged, but it is still there. It's still part of the floor of the church. It provides detailed information about the Holy Land and especially the layout of Jerusalem in the late Roman, pre-Muslim era. For a history buff like myself, this was fascinating. Now, the Episcopal Diocese of Jerusalem includes Jordan, and there are large active Arabs, and there is a large active Arab-speaking Anglican parish in Amman. And again, Amman is the capital city and the largest city in Jordan. The Episcopal Diocese also operates and supports several schools and hospitals in Jordan, and our 2012 pilgrimage with the Diocese of Maryland visited these. The Holy Land has had 3,000 years of history as various tribes, armies, refugees, pilgrims, and assorted people have passed through. On both tours, your pilgrims visited desert monasteries, usually Greek Orthodox. We have seen ruins of Crusader castles and remnants of more modern times. Really a fascinating land of contrasts and history. Hope you have enjoyed this series. If you have not had an opportunity, I hope the day will come when you have the opportunity to visit a Holy Land on pilgrimage. Since we visited last year, war has now broken out in the Holy Land, and we are simply cannot forecast when pilgrimages will be available once again. But it is a land of faith and a land of hope, and Christians have, over the centuries, always found a way to travel there. Thank you very much for your time and for your attention.